So today, we're going to crack open a pretty controversial playbook from 1978. It's called The Art of Manipulation by R.B. Sparkman, and it's a book that basically claims to pull back the curtain on all the hidden techniques people use to get exactly what they want. And let me tell you, some of these ideas are, well, they're pretty unsettling. Let's dive in. Right off the bat, the book asks the question that I think every single one of us has probably wondered at some point. You know those people? Why is it that a handful of them can just charm and persuade and kind of breeze their way to success, while the rest of us, well, don't?
Sparkman's answer is, to put it mildly, provocative. He says the world is basically split into two groups. You've got a tiny 5% who get it. They understand the hidden levers of human nature. And then there's the other 95% of us who are constantly being influenced by them, a lot of the time without even having a clue it's happening.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to break down Sparkman's playbook piece by piece. First, we'll look at what he calls the 95% problem. Then, we'll uncover where he even learned this stuff. Spoiler, it's not where you think. After that, we'll get into the actual mindset, 3 of their most potent tactics, and, this is the important part, how you can spot them and defend yourself. And then we'll wrap up with the big ethical question at the end. All right, first up, the 95% problem. The core argument here is that the main reason most people don't get what they want is because they're just doing what feels natural. And this quote right here, it nails the whole idea. Sparkman is saying that our gut reactions, getting defensive or showing we really want something or trying to argue a point, they're all super predictable. He calls them a fool's compass. And that predictability, that's exactly what the 5% learn to play, like an instrument, because they're not operating on impulse. They're running a calculated strategy. So where on earth did Sparkman dig up these ideas? Well, it wasn't from a university library or some psychology journal. His research method was, let's call it unorthodox. Back in the 70s, he moves to this boomtown in Houston and ends up falling in with a crew of hustlers. His main mentor was this guy named Hardy, a self-proclaimed silver-tongued devil. Sparkman literally spent a year living with these guys, just watching and documenting what he calls their distilled street wisdom. So yeah, this is an academic theory. This is the stuff they used every single day to survive. So from this, let's call it an education, he basically identified 2 foundational pillars, 2 core beliefs that a true manipulator projects in every single interaction they have. The first one is all about projecting this state of mind. Sparkman says the person who has the power is always the one who's willing to walk away. Just by projecting this vibe, this I'm good either way, I don't really need you, you completely flip the script. The balance of power shifts, and suddenly the other person is working to get your approval, not the other way around. And pillar number 2 is what Sparkman calls the single strongest law of human nature. It's so simple, but so powerful. We are wired to want what we can't have. Scarcity, unavailability, it creates desire. This little quirk in our brains is the engine that drives so many of the book's most effective tactics. So that's the mindset. But how does that actually translate into action? Let's get into the nitty-gritty and look at 3 specific plays right out of the book. Okay, this first tactic is going to sound completely backwards. Instead of acting like you're the expert, Sparkman says to do the opposite. Act meek. He actually quotes a millionaire who told him, "The smartest people you'll ever meet are the ones that don't act like they know much." And why does this work? Well, it makes people totally underestimate you. They drop their guard, and they often feel an impulse to help you. Tactic 2 is a straight-up psychological classic. Sparkman uses the old experiment with pigeons who peck a bar to get food. When the food came out every single time, they were calm. But when the reward was random, intermittent, sometimes it came, sometimes it didn't, the pigeons started pecking like crazy. That uncertainty, it's incredibly addictive. And this is where it gets really powerful. Constant praise and affection feels safe, sure, but it can also be taken for granted. But intermittent reinforcement, that creates this unstable, obsessive dynamic. Sparkman tells this really chilling story about a woman who was just trapped by her abusive boyfriend, Bill, because he had perfected this cycle of intense affection followed by cruel distance. It kept her desperate for that next little crumb of approval. All right, our third tactic here starts with a pretty cynical but, let's face it, true observation. The world runs on favoritism. Now, instead of getting mad about it, the manipulator just accepts it and then weaponizes it. They don't just wait for friendships to happen, they actively build them as a tool. And here's one of the book's most practical, almost shockingly simple ways to do it. Sparkman tells this story about landing a huge contract from a record store owner. He didn't do it with some slick sales pitch, nope. He just asked the guy how he built his business, and then sat there and listened intently for an hour while the guy told his story. People love talking about their journey. It builds an instant connection. Okay, knowing these offensive plays is one thing, but the book also gives you a defensive playbook. How do you recognize when these tactics are being used against you? This is crucial stuff. So, Sparkman lists several huge red flags he learned directly from Hardy. First, be really wary of anyone who is constantly telling you how honest they are. Also, watch out for those sob stories, especially the riches to rags one. It's a classic setup. A really big one, if they lie easily to other people right in front of you, guess what? They're gonna lie to you too. And finally, never ever make a large payment up front. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. Sparkman admits that he himself got conned out of $800 by one of his own roommates, a guy he called the Dallas Man, who used these exact same tricks. It's a powerful reminder that literally anyone can be a target. And that painful lesson leads to the book's absolute #1 rule for financial self-defense, a lesson straight from the master con artist, Hardy. Whoever holds the money holds the power. It's that simple. The second you hand over your cash, you've given up all your leverage. The advice is crystal clear. Don't pay until you have exactly what you were promised, in your hands. So this all brings us to the big, unavoidable question looming over everything we've talked about. Is any of this okay? I mean, is it moral? The book actually wraps up by tackling this head-on. So here's Sparkman's own disclaimer. He argues that these techniques aren't inherently good or evil. They're just a tool, like a hammer. It can be used to build a house, or it can be used to break a window. He says the morality isn't in the tool itself, but in the hands and the intention of the person using it. And really, that's what this all comes down to. That's the central dilemma. Look, we all try to persuade people. We all try to influence outcomes. But where do you draw the line? At what point does simple influence cross over into something much darker? Sparkman's playbook doesn't really give us an easy answer, but it sure forces you to ask the question.